Welcome back. Our next two guests are living the way we should all be living with less. Joshua and Ryan were childhood best friends who became successful, wealthy, and busy beyond belief, but something changed, and that gave it all a start to something called Minimalist Movement. It's grown to more than 2 million followers, and they're back in our broadcast studio now to talk about their new book.
We're minimizing.
The new book called Everything That Remains.
That's right.
Susie, why are you laughing?
Because they're minimalists and they've got 2 million followers. A minimalist should have 2 followers.
We need to preface this. We're sitting on the floor because we decided to minimize our
That's right.
self, our chairs, and just get to the basics.
Well, then I should have put on my yoga pants. It's a lot more
What's the first thing you gave up? Your most important thing you gave up, what was it?
Oh, the most important thing was my identity. I had so much tied up in what was on my business card. And it was amazing to me that it's the first thing we ask people is, what do you do? And it's an incredibly dangerous question, I think, because truthfully, I do a lot of things. I wear blue jeans, I walk down the street, I drink water, but we're really saying, how much money do you earn so I can compare myself, compared to you, where you stand on the socioeconomic ladder. So getting rid of my identity was hard. I got rid of a lot of stuff before that. I got rid of about 90% of my possessions, but it took about 8 months for me to do that.
What was the biggest thing you gave away?
Yeah, I would have to go with identity as well. It was so much who I identified myself with. If you were to ask me what I was passionate about, I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything. You asked me what I did for a job, I would have been like, oh, let me tell you all these hundreds of employees that I manage and all this revenue that I manage. I never really,
So what do you tell people now that you've got millions of followers and all that? So you're still hooked up with an identity, it's just different.
Right, I call it turning a noun into a verb. Instead of saying what I do, I tell people what I'm passionate about. I'll say I'm really passionate about writing, or passionate about snowboarding, or whatever it may be, and then I'll flip the question around. I'll say, what are you passionate about? And it totally changes the trajectory of the question and the conversation.
And we talk about this a lot on the show about living your eulogy instead of your resume. And that's kind of what y'all have done. You've turned, instead of identifying yourself with, like you said, how much money you make, all the things that we consume that really, at the end of the day, don't matter at all. And you're making it more about what you're passionate about and what drives your spirit and what drives your soul.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what are some tips, though? Because we're all busy. We've all got kids and work and the show and everything. What are some tips you guys give to help people start the minimalist path?
So, getting this stuff out of the way is kind of the initial bite at the apple. I mean, you could go home, rent a dumpster, and throw away all your stuff and be completely miserable. But, what I did personally is I did a packing party where Josh literally helped me box up everything in my 2,000 square foot condo, and as if I were moving, and I would unpack things as I needed it day by day. I did that for about 3 weeks. So you can imagine, like, that first night I unpacked some bed sheets, my toothbrush, and some clothes for work the next day. That might be a little too extreme for anybody to pack up their entire place. But what I recommend is maybe do a packing party with, like, that closet that is overflowing that you've been putting off, or the garage that is overflowing with things. Just start small. Just get a little momentum.
I actually started this week. There's just some areas in my house that I just feel really cluttered. And when I walk by, they just make me feel burdened and confused. And I know this sounds really silly and simple, but I think it goes along the lines of what you're talking about in this book.
Now, we've had y'all on the show before talking about your first book, and y'all are here kind of to talk about your second book, Everything That Remains. So, if for those of for our viewers or for people watching who have read the first book, how does the second book differ?
This is more of a why-to book. The first one was a how-to book. It was very prescriptive. Here's how you do it. This is much more about our story.
And what's left after you do all that.
Absolutely. Once you clear the clutter out of the way, you make room for what's most important in your life. Things like health or relationships or pursuing what you're passionate about, or growing as an individual, contributing to other people, and contributing beyond yourself, adding value to other people's lives, so much more important than the stuff that we have in our lives.
And let me ask you something. You live in Montana. Do you all live together? Are you roommates?
Yeah, we are roommates.
Okay. And there's a big difference between the two of you. I mean, I can look at I can look at you, and there is a big difference. Okay, so what you may consider something that's essential, you may think is something that can be disposed of. How do you work that out? Like, do you have chairs in your,
Right? Yeah.
What kind of car do you drive?
Here's I think if you were to walk into my house right now, you wouldn't walk in there and say, oh my gosh, this guy's a minimalist.
You have nothing.
I have a lot more stuff in my living room than this.
You don't sit on the floor and talk to your friends, right?
Okay, listen, we've got more with Josh and Ryan when we come back, so stick around. These guys are so much fun.
Thank you.